It strikes me that's an anecdote that the president would want to hold up. Kevin Brady, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, would want to hold up, making the argument here that something has to be done with regard to making it easier for companies to repatriate profits from overseas. What are the stumbling blocks to doing that, to getting that reform made in Congress right now?
Well, I mean, there is a lively debate about what happens with repatriation. That occurred under the Bush administration. Corporations use that to pay dividends. There's a big question about whether that creates jobs or not. So that is something that is a matter of debate. I think as far as having a repatriation piece, that is probably very likely. I think the bigger question is what you do with some of the deductions and loopholes, especially on the individual side, and that's really going to be the holdup. There's really very little appetite for doing what the Obama administration suggested, which was just corporate-only tax reform. They want to do on the individual side to deal with pass-throughs and businesses structured that way. And then you get into the whole complication of all the popular tax deductions, including state and local tax deductions, something very popular in places like New York, Maryland, on the East Coast that the Trump administration has suggested scaling back and gotten a lot of pushback already on that idea.
Erik, recovery continues along the Gulf Coast. I've just had two members of Congress say they want a relief plan to be top of the agenda when they get back to Washington, D.C. I'm moving here with trepidation here to ask you about the politics, but what does that mean for tax reform? If you have a limited amount of time, 12 legislative days in the House before the funding has to be decided upon for the next fiscal year, how does that change the calculus for tax reform going forward?
Well, there's two aspects to this. One thing is that at least as far as Congress is concerned, a popular bill like Harvey aid can grease the wheels. We might see it used as the vehicle to raise the debt ceiling, to avoid a government shutdown, and all that's a net positive for tax reform. Getting that kind of bruising political fight off the table really helps Congress do the deliberative work of working on tax reform. On the other hand, Harvey aid is going to cost something. It could be $100 billion. That is likely to not be paid for. That would add to the deficit. We would see an increasing budget deficit year over year, and Trump getting some flack for that. So that could actually help Ryan and McConnell as far as their argument that tax reform needs to be paid for. But then again, once you go towards paying for it, you're into a much more sticky situation as far as finding those than just a simple tax cut. So I think there are very interesting effects that could come from Harvey aid. We just have to map those out in the coming weeks and months.